This is CSC 494-598, Information Retrieval, Mining and Integration on the Internet. I assume you all signed up for it. So as I said, this week the entire class will be meeting both on Tuesday and Thursday, and then I'll talk about what happens starting next week. Okay. So before so basically today's class, I sort of wanted to give you an idea of what you can expect in the course, what you expect to learn from the course, and also the specific organization that I have sent you the emails about. We can talk a little bit about that. So today the space would be at a premium. Unfortunately, if everybody who actually signed up shows up, some of them have to stand up, but and then we just hope that fire marshals won't come and throw all out. Next week onwards, things will be fine. So what do you learn in this course? Basically, it's a long name. I really think that every part of that name is important, but nobody else seems to think so. Most of you keep thinking of this as a IR course. IR is only 1/3 of this course. Information retrieval is only 1/3 of the course. The other parts, the mining and integration, are also just as important. In particular, what I think you would be able to get in this course is, after this course, you should be able to understand at least the following things. You should be able to answer how search engines work and why are some better than others. You should be able to, you should be able to answer, can web be seen as a collection of data and our knowledge, in which case then just as you use data in databases or knowledge in knowledge bases, you should be able to use web as a whole as your own private database or private knowledge base, and should be able to answer queries, should be able to search for information, everything. Some of it is already being done. Can you do much more than that? Can useful patterns be mined from the pages and the data on the web? Can we learn, everything is written in a natural language. If you do not understand natural language, if your program doesn't understand natural language, can you still get useful information, extract useful information out of the web? That's one more thing you should be able to answer after this course. And can we exploit the connectedness of the web pages? That's one more interesting thing about web. Unlike the libraries, where the books do actually refer to each other in the libraries, but it's very hard to follow those links. You have to see the end of the book to see the references and go from one book to other. On the web, at least for pages, it turns out they have this link structure, and you should be able to see how pages are connected to each other, and then use that link structure. And if there is link structure, can you use it? Okay, that's one more thing that you will be able to think about and answer. So these are some of the things you should be able to get by the end of this course. Okay, just some of them. Okay, so but that will give you an idea as to, it was previously just a number. It should at least tell you whether any of these things are of interest to you. If all of them look boring as hell, there are other courses being done and you should take those. Okay. Okay, any questions before I go forward? Okay, so the class is going to be trying the inverted classroom experiment. So you should be able to read slides like this. Otherwise you are in the wrong class. Anyway, so what am I talking about? As I mentioned, for most of you, I already sent mails, I already done polling and everything, so you know the story. But essentially, we're going to try this class, run this class as a hybrid class. What that means is starting next week, there will be a lot more space, first of all. Okay. So starting next week, the 494 students will come to class only on Tuesday. They can come on Thursday too. I'm not going to stop you, okay? But Tuesdays will be for 494 students, and they are undergrad students, mostly. I think they should all be undergrad students. And basically we will be discussing they'll come on Tuesday. 598 students come on Thursday. That's the deal, okay? Now, what happens when you come on the class? Before you come to the class, you watch the lecture videos, So basically, before you come to the class, So many of you probably looked at this. Last time when I taught this course, I recorded all the videos, and the lecture notes as well as the videos are available. The PowerPoint slide as well as the videos are available. Furthermore, actually, if you look at these parts, for example, I think in this week we will cover lecture 1 and 2. So starting next week, you will really start looking at the technical stuff, information retrieval. So if you look at information retrieval, that's lecture 4 and lecture 5. So when you come to class next week, you should have seen those 2 videos. Okay, now these are YouTube videos. You see it the way you want. If you want to approximate it to the classroom experience of maybe sampling whatever I am saying and then checking your cell phone, you can do that at home. Okay, but you should at least understand what is here, because this, in some sense, is a synopsis of the lecture. I spent a lot of time at that time to, after the video, you can go stand there, please. Okay. This is the synopsis of the lecture, and so when you watch that, you should at least have gotten this. Okay. So, and having done that, and this is again, you can be angry at the video quality. I tried to dress differently on different days, so I look very handsome and all that, but the cameramen were not very good. So you get what you get, and then you watch them, and you come to the class. Okay, so that's the story. Remember about the synopsis that are actually present there. That is both a way of understanding at the end of the semester what happened in the class, and before the semester, when you're watching the lectures, after watching the lecture, you should at least know this. You should know a lot more than this, but you should at least know this. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay? Now, having done that, then you come to the class, and you can take notes when you're listening to the lectures, and you may have gotten stuck in places, you wanted to ask questions. Essentially, in the class, we will first spend most of the time discussing any questions you might have, or maybe doing additional examples. And furthermore, I think in the class, in my understanding, and this could be wrong by the end of the semester, but undergrads might require maybe more examples to be worked out. I don't know. And grad students might want to be more brave and discuss things that are not in the lecture. So there's a lot more that goes on. This course, I've been teaching it a bunch of times, but I have not given it, I think since 2001. And I have not given it a real number. It's still called 494. If it's a real class, then it has a real number. This is left as a course in progress because every time there's more material. Some material is old and some new material can be covered. Okay, so what I would do is I could use additional time in the class to talk about things that may have been just hinted at in the lecture, but we can go further on that. That might happen more often in graduate classes, graduate section than in undergraduate section. Okay, as I said, you are required to show up on the days you are supposed to show up. So the undergrads are required to show up on Tuesdays, grad students are required to show up on Thursdays. If you want to eavesdrop in the other section, I cannot stop you. You're welcome. Maybe there's no space, you can stand there. But it's fine. Okay. I think if you show up on those 2 classes, on the one class per week, you would be in pretty good shape. Okay. So that's essentially what happens starting next week. This week we'll do one more class of introduction. That's on Thursday too, and we'll still be doing it this way. Okay. Any questions on this part till now? Okay, I should also mention why am I trying this. It's not necessarily because I don't like the sound of my voice. I would love to repeat all the lectures again. I think it might be an interesting experiment to try because this class has traditionally been really a big mix of undergrad and grad students with differing backgrounds, and sometimes it's frustrating for both groups, that they're mixed up with the other group, okay? And so this might help me provide a more differentiated support for the undergrads versus grad students. And secondly, I think I've explained everything I wanted to explain, and I try to wear the same exact shirts in the class. I only have 4 shirts anyway, so you won't see any difference. That will be seamless continuation of lectures in the class as well as in the lectures. And I think this will give us more time to discuss things that actually people got stuck on. Whereas when I come prepared to give a lecture, I do what I feel like doing. Okay? I think people seem to like it anyway, but I would rather try and see what people got stuck on and then spend more time explaining that. Okay? To make sure that you actually watch the videos, I reserve the right to give beginning of the class quizzes. Okay, so and the department actually wanted some experiment like this to be tried, basically because they want to understand whether in fact, when you have resources like these videos available, can we improve the teaching delivery? Okay. It may well be that at the end of the semester you find that this is a sad experiment and you shouldn't have tried it. At that time, I hope that you won't yell at me. But you basically we would have tried it once. Okay, that's basically where we are. And I honestly think that it's actually more work for me. It's so much simpler to just repeat what I have said last time with a slightly different accent. But I think it would be more interesting. That's the reason I'm trying. Okay. Any questions before I go forward on this?
So
Yes.
we have received the request from the Piazza forum. So can we use it for the questions which we arise for the watching those videos?
Yeah, I'll talk about Piazza in a minute. Yes. Any other questions? Okay. So now for the $50 bomb. So when I started this, I could have just done it. I basically could have changed the class, and the people who want to stay, people who want to leave. But I tried to do this as democratically as possible. I actually ran a poll, and I can show you the results of the poll. And as I said, essentially all undergrads wanted to try this experiment. And most, I think close to a slight edge of grad students wanted just the normal traditional classroom, but it's only 2 difference. Okay, so the majority in the whole class wanted to try the experiment. So that's when I decided, I told the department I would try it. Okay. However, as of yesterday, we were all taken by surprise that ASU Registrar's Office considers this hybrid course also as an I course, and because of which they charge a technology fee. It is particularly sad that there is no technology, that ASU Registrar's Office is actually supporting. YouTube is going to be streaming the videos. I took the videos. However, think of this as the fee you have to pay to not see me once a week. So it's $50 to not see me once a week. If you don't want to see me twice a week, $100 is the fee. But anyway, honestly, all I can say is I tried my best. I almost wanted to just go back to the other class experiment. I just felt it's worth trying, and in $50 is the fee that we cannot change. I can tell you that the department tried, the associate dean of the college tried. It's not easy to change that. All I can say is, for any of you, if it is a undue financial hardship, please let me know, and we'll see what we can do for your special case. That's all. Okay. The fee itself is levied by the university. I can't change it. Okay. If you are coming to a point where you have to drop the course for $50 fee, please tell me. Okay. There are many good reasons for dropping this course, but $50 fee is not one of them. Okay, so that's where it is. And again, I did not know about it until somebody sent me a mail saying, "What's all this $50 fee I'm being asked to pay?" But that's when I found out, and there was a huge number of mails that went back and forth. I can't go into all the details, but suffice it to say that the department actually is trying to. They're not trying to do this to somehow get more out of less. In fact, they're giving more teaching support, TA support to this class. But this $50 fee is a university thing, and it's just the way it was set up. Okay, so I cannot explain it. I don't like it, but I can't change the rule. Okay, so you have to deal with it, and all I can say, as I said, I'll repeat myself. If you find yourself not liking the inverted class experiment, I can't change it. You can drop the course. It's fine. But if you find yourself, thinking that this looks like an interesting way to do the class, but $50 is too much for you to pay, and that's the reason you have to drop the class, please stop. I might be able to do things for you. Special case. Okay? That's where I am. Any questions? Okay. So, contact information, it's too late to tell this, but I am Rao Kampati, and that's my email address, rao@asu.edu, and that's my URL. If you just say Rao ASU, you'll get that information anyway. This is the classroom, the class page with all the videos, and then the class itself is Tuesday, Thursday, 10:30 to 11:45, as I said. And as you can see from your myasu.edu, if you are a 494 student, you only have to officially show up on Tuesdays. If you are a 598 student, you only have to officially show up on Thursdays. But you're completely welcome to come to both classes. Just make it even extra repetition. Okay? But classes themselves will be discussions of the videos, lectures that you already watched. And so if you come to the class without having watched the video, this is not going to work for you. Okay? That's the reality. Okay. My office hours would be 11:45 to 12:45, basically right after this class. As you know, so I will be in my office 560, or you can catch me as I'm walking to my office. We'll all walk to my office. So that's where the office hours are going to be. Okay? So, and an office hours basically, irrespective of whether you show up for one class or two classes, you can come to my office hours. Okay? More importantly, actually, we also are going to have the Piazza system, which basically, all of you who are already registered by last day before yesterday, you already got the invitations, and then for the rest, I will resend the invitations. That basically, I just don't have the here, but it's a. Let me see if I can log in. Okay, I forgot my password. So that's fine. Oh yeah, I know my password. I forgot my user ID. You guys can't tell my password, right? I will type it. There. Okay, so this is actually sort of a startup. How many of you heard of the MOOCs, the Massively Online Courses? Okay, it just started July of 2011. The first MOOC was held in July of 2011, and since then there are companies which are basically doing Massively Online Courses, and there are many. Educational technology is changing very fast, extremely rapidly, and one of the things that a startup company called Piazza is essentially, it's mostly a better version of Blackboard, and I haven't really used it till now. I used to use blogs and forums, but this is supposed to, I've heard very good things about it. It essentially gives you a way of having discussions about the class, and you can ask questions and other people can answer. I don't necessarily have to answer. If other students answer, I can then tell whether those, and I can tick whether or not that answer is right or wrong, and all sorts of ways you can collaborate. In general itself, people always tell me that if they wind up making a mistake of taking my class, their inbox is too full of emails from me. So this is a way of reducing the emails that I send directly to you. I might still send, but much more of the questions can be posted here, and the answers will be seen by everybody. And so that's something that we will try. Okay? So that's what the forum is. And yes, indeed, that if you, while you are watching the lecture, if you ask a question, if you have a question, you can type it in there, and either that will get answered right away, or it will get answered the next day morning when you come to the next day, when you come to the class. The next day, whenever you come. Okay, so that's Piazza. Some funny story about this is this was started by this Indian woman. who went to an engineering college, and I'm sure some of you here, women in engineering college, can relate to this. And she found that all the guys have groups in which they can do discussions, etc. And she was the only girl in the class, and she didn't have any way of discussions and so on. So apparently that affected her deeply. So when she came here, she started this startup, $23 million startup funds. Okay, so a big company. Okay, interesting story. But anyway, we'll try to use that for the forum discussions. Okay, any questions? Okay. So the rest of today's class is actually like two-layer discussion. One layer of basically what are the requirements in the course, what are the projects, etc., etc., and then followed by a high-level overview of what happens in the course. That we might start it today, and we might continue little of it next on Thursday's class. Okay, and as I said, starting Tuesday, undergrads will come on Tuesday, and grads will come on Thursday. That's required. You can always show up in all classes. Okay. So what happens, as I said, in this course, basically in terms of, I gave you some ideas of what questions you should be able to answer earlier. But if you're talking about specific broad computer science topics, you would kind of get the following topics is what I expect to spend time on. One is called information retrieval. I'll explain to you in a while. If you don't already know what information retrieval is, you will by the end of today's class, hopefully, what it is. The other is social networks. The third is information integration and aggregation. The fourth is information mining. And the fifth is any other topics that come to my head. Okay. So these are what the topics of the course are. Okay. Now, one other thing that you can do is figure out what people who took the course last time got, especially because you're going to wind up watching the same lectures they watched, right? And so, in fact, if you go to the web page of the course, there is a little thing called acquired wisdom, which you will also get to do if you survive in the course at the end of the class. So there is an acquired wisdom. That's the fall 11 acquired wisdom. And where basically students are required to write down, top K things that they understood or appreciated in the course. Instructor is not one of them. Basically, it's all about technical material. And so if you read their answers, you'll get an idea. So there are 51 comments here. And so somebody here, JC, says SVD is one of the things that JC liked most. Then clustering and so on. So if you read this, you'll get an idea. If you kind of want to jump ahead and see what did people like me get from the course, you'll get an idea of what people got. Okay. I expected them to probably get more, but this is what they got. Okay, so this is the lower bound of what you get to get. Okay. That's about what we'll expect to do in the course. The topics, this is not exactly the numbers from last semester, but it's very much relevant. I think we'll spend about 1 or 2 lectures on the introduction. That's what we'll do this week. Information retrieval, about 3 lectures. Tolerant indexing and tolerant dictionaries, about 2 lectures. Correlation analysis and latent semantic indexing, about 3 lectures. Link analysis, which is where you talk about page rank, authority swaps, kinds of ideas, about 3 lectures. Social network analysis actually is much more the page rank stuff. That's about 3 lectures. Crawling for pages, map reduce. By the way, if all of this makes sense to you, it's already good. Probably you're on the wrong course. You probably don't need to take this course. If it doesn't make sense to you, that's fine, because this is what we will be doing, and so you'll get enough time to figure out. Again, the problem with this kind of a course is probably you are not, unless you're living in a cave, probably you know many of these words already. I would be particularly impressed if you know latent semantic indexing, but I would be surprised if you didn't know MapReduce. Who knows MapReduce? Okay, see, at least one. So I'm still very surprised. that enough people haven't heard about MapReduce. The real reason Google works is not PageRank, but because of MapReduce. Okay, it's cluster computing. You might have heard about the word cluster computing, cloud computing, and it's a particular form of coarse-grained parallelism. Okay, and essentially we will learn a little about that, and then of course doing crawling to actually index pages. That's the crawling part. Okay. That's one aspect, one half. The other half, we'll talk about clustering results, we'll talk about classifying text pages, we'll talk about recommender systems. That's what, again, I guess everybody is recommending stuff to you these days, especially Amazon and Netflix. We'll talk about the theory behind the recommender systems. We'll talk about structure, specifying and exploiting structure. This is a huge deal. We'll talk in a minute about why structure is so important to us. But we'll spend a bunch of time on how to get structure and how to exploit structure. Okay, that it'll become clearer, hopefully even by the end of this class. And then we'll talk about the information extraction part. We'll talk about information integration part. Those are the things, and those are approximate number of lectures per topic. But actually, you already know your future because the lectures are recorded. Okay, what we'll wind up doing is the parts of the lectures that you wanted more elaboration on, more discussion on. That's what we'll wind up doing in the class. That's the inverted part of the class. Okay, books are lacks thereof. While you are spending $50 for the privilege of doing the hybrid class, thankfully you don't have to pay any money for actual books because everything is online. In fact, this book, Information Retrieval, is probably one of the more useful ones, but it's completely available online. The PDF and HTML files are available. But more importantly, I actually have a pretty big reading list for each topic. So if you go here to the reading list, then for each topic, let's say traditional information retrieval readings, and here is basically the readings that you're supposed to do. And text retrieval readings, here are the readings you're supposed to do. Now in general, the idea is the reading list is very long. If you read all of them, then it's very good for you, but you don't necessarily need to read every paper. The idea is the more the indentation, the more optional the reading is. Okay, unindented readings are required. You have to read them. Anything indented, if you are a little brave. Anything doubly indented, you should be really brave. Okay, and so on. Okay, and that's the basic idea of that reading list. Okay, and in many cases, we actually will look at the actual papers for Authorities Hubs, for example. This may well be the only course that you will get to where you will open a JACM paper. That is Weinberg's Authorities Hubs paper. Do people know what JACM is? JACM is Journal of Association of Computing Machinery. That's considered the flagship journal of computer science. As Mark Twain once said, a classic is something that everybody wishes that they have already read and nobody had read ever. JACM is a journal everybody wishes they already know what's going on in it, but nobody actually reads because it's really, really theoretical. But you'll at least read one paper, parts of one paper from it when we look at Authorities Hubs. Okay, so that's the basic idea of the readings. Most of, if you actually follow the lectures and the lecture notes, you really almost don't need to read the additional material just to pass the course. But you can do a lot more, I hope, than just survive the course. Okay, so that's what the situation is. So if I were to ask one single book type thing, then this would be the book type thing. But we go much beyond that. Basically, there are parts on it in it which we don't do, because it's mostly just about information retrieval. We will do a lot of things about information integration. We'll also do things about social networks. We'll also do things about data mining, information mining. Okay, and so we will. But this will probably be one book that is most useful, and it's available online. Okay. Any questions? Stop me if you have any questions. Okay. Useful background. 310 data structures is the minimum, and any course that you may have done on algorithms should be very useful. databases and intro to AI, if you have taken either of those courses, you would enjoy the course a lot more. If you didn't, you will still survive, but they basically it's just a question of if you have taken those courses, you'll be able to make a lot more connections in your head, and we're talking about various topics. Okay, and one other thing that is kind of interesting is I don't know, most computer science students basically take math and forget it because they don't really use it. They mostly do programming. You will actually use some of the math that is programming. In particular, linear algebra and probability statistics are parts of the math that you will use particularly in this course. Okay. There are we will sort of. To some extent, you have to refresh your memory about, in the case of linear algebra, you want to understand eigenvalues, eigenvectors, and we will talk about the idea of matrix decomposition, in particular singular value decomposition that underlies the latent semantic indexing. Okay, that's from the linear algebra side. The probability statistics side, you should know discrete probabilities, Bayes' rule, and one of the other very interesting things is this notion of probability distributions. And most distributions that you have heard of tend to be what are called exponential distributions, in the sense that away from the mean, the probability falls exponentially rapidly. Do you understand what I'm saying? So actually, let me tell you something useful, even if you don't come to the next class and ever again learn something, one useful thing. This curve, right? The bell curve, right? The Gaussian. Now, the interesting thing about bell curve, is essentially at the mean, it has the highest probability. And then as you go away from the mean, the probability falls. Not only does the probability fall, it falls exponentially. Okay? Now, so basically it's e power minus x squared. Right? That's the way it will fall. In fact, in particular, it's e power minus x minus mu by sigma whole square. And then 1 by 2 by sigma. Okay. Now, the thing is that as you go away from mu, which is the mean, your probability falls exponentially. Which is why, do people know about these 6 sigma kids? What's a 6 sigma kid? So, if you are ranking people in terms of their competence, this is the average kid. A 6 sigma kid will be 6 sigmas away from the mean. The probability of finding somebody 6 sigmas away from the mean is extremely low. Extremely low. That's why we celebrate 6 sigma kids, for better or worse. I mean, you can also be 6 sigma kid on this side. Minus 6 sigma. That too should be celebrated because it's far away from the average. Okay, this is what you normally know of the distributions. These are the exponential distributions. And it turns out that there's another kind of distributions that are much more useful for us, which are called the power law distributions, where the probability falls polynomially rather than exponentially with x. So it might fall 1 by x squared as you go away from the mean. Okay? And it turns out many natural phenomena are actually power law distributions, and we spend a lot of time. In fact, because they are power law distributions, PageRank exists because the degree distribution of pages is power law, not exponential. Okay? So, and it's not obvious as to what that distinctions mean, but partly we'll learn to appreciate power law distributions as we go through this. Another power law, it turns out, is the Zipf's law. Zipf's law basically says, so I just read a bunch of books, let's say, and I wrote all the words in the books and the number of times those words occurred in all the books combined. And then I found that the most frequent word was the in English. That's what happens, right? The is the most frequent word. And it appeared 2 billion times. The second most frequent word appears approximately how many times? Guess. So I just told you that the most frequent word appeared 2 billion times. Second most frequent word, maybe is the second most frequent. How often does it appear normally?
500 million.
It's half of 2 billion, basically. So basically, Zipf's law says the frequency of the kth most frequent word is 1 over k of the frequency of the most frequent word. Zipf's law is again extremely useful because it's a natural law. In fact, these are all, the power law distributions in general. Zipf's law basically is Pauli 1 over x. That's also called power law because it's a polynomial in x. Power law distributions they're also called rich get richer distributions, and for reasons we'll hear about later. One of the interesting things is natural phenomena actually follow these distributions. And in fact, the more frequent words, so for example, this is why the topmost word is so much more frequent than the second topmost word. Okay, and because of which we'll see, one of the most useful things that you learn hopefully in 2 weeks' time is this idea of inverse document frequency, which is not only do you want to know when you are trying to retrieve documents from a big collection of documents, you're not only interested in using keywords like the way you're doing in Google, right? I mean, you give a bunch of keywords and you're trying to look for files which have those keywords and the most relevant files with respect to that. And so not only do you want the files that have that word many times, but you also specifically want files which have suppose if I'm looking, for example, the cantankerous apple. This is what I'm looking for on Google. I just decided that's what I'm really going to look for. Okay? And here is a page P1. It has the apple. Page P2. It contains cantankerous apple. Both of them have 2 of the words you're looking for. Are both equally good for you? Are both equally good for you? No. You don't know anything about information retrieval. But you can clearly see that you would rather have this than this. Why? Because the is way too common. There's a Far Side. How many of you know Far Side cartoons? Far Side. Okay. So you should stay in the course. Okay. He has raised his hand twice. You'll enjoy. So Far Side cartoons, there's a one Far Side cartoon where this cow was getting ready with his little suitcase to join the local zoo. And then the cow's mom explains that as an animal, it's just way too common. That's why you don't have cows in the zoos, except with the petting zoo part. Right? There's nothing wrong with cows. Cows are good. And some of you eat them. But the problem is they're just way too common. And so nobody is really going to pay good money to watch a cow in a zoo. On the other hand, pandas are great. People from China, if there's any here, would probably not pay anything at all to watch a panda because there's way too many of them. And similarly, we will watch, a kangaroo. People in Australia are sick and tired of kangaroos because they are jumping into their cars and getting them into major accidents all the time. Do you understand what I'm saying? What's wrong with kangaroo? The problem with kangaroo is not that there's anything wrong, particularly in its build-up. It's the question of inverse document frequency. How common is it? Okay? And the way you would have understood that for the case of kangaroos or for the case of the and cantankerous apple is you would have realized that the word cantankerous is much more rare. And so having a rare word, that's a query word, in the file should count more than having a word which is not that rare. You see what I'm saying? Now, to be able to talk about rareness, it should be the case that the language, the documents, don't uniformly select each word with the same probability. Do you get this? Imagine I'm making the way I write English language files is that, the vocabulary, I have a vocabulary, I don't know, if you're a high school student, vocabulary of 25 words, and then you pick, 1/25th probability each of the words every time, and just put them in. That's not the way we make them. Some words we just use, like the F word we use more often than some of the other words. Do you see what I'm saying? So the more frequent words, the fact that actually the words have non-uniform Zipf's law distribution is connected to the fact that you can use inverse document frequency to do the retrieval. You understand what I'm saying? The nature has these are natural phenomena, actually. Funny as it might sound, the words we use and the languages we use, they're all natural phenomena, and they have certain properties, and we exploit them in doing the information retrieval or mining or learning and so on. Okay, so I just went on a big tirade on that on this part, but that's why we want to remember something about probability theory. Discrete probabilities in particular, Bayes' rule, and then we'll talk a little more about power law distributions, which are also called long-tail distributions, in the sense that exponential distributions have a short tail because they just fall very close to zero very fast because they're falling exponentially. Whereas compared to them, an x-squared distribution goes much longer. This is something that people don't necessarily understand. When you look at any distribution like this, you compare it to a uniform distribution which doesn't at all fall, and think, man, this thing is falling at least. But when you compare this to this, it's not falling fast enough. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's the fact that it doesn't fall fast enough is just as important as the fact that it falls at all. Okay, if it doesn't fall at all, if it is a uniform distribution, you won't have the notions of IDF. There is no rare words versus non-rare words. And if it falls too fast, there won't be a page rank. Because there will be one or two pages that actually have a large number of links, and everybody else, away from the mean, everybody else basically. So there's an average number of links, and most pages have the average number of links, and everybody else, away from the average, there are very, very few pages. So there's no point in talking about page rank anymore. If everybody's at the average, why talk about differentiating them? Do you understand that? Okay, so long tail phenomena are also connected to, those are things that actually exist in the world, and we wind up exploiting them, and that's part of prerequisites. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so that's about prerequisites. What do I not expect to do in this course? I don't know why. Okay, anyway, okay, now it's working. Yeah, so I will not be doing anything that will make you become a better webmaster. Okay, there are much better places which might teach you how to be a webmaster. So I won't be teaching you anything. You might just pick it up by yourself if you don't already know how to be a webmaster. I won't expose you to all the latest X buzzwords, the XML, the X pointer, the XPath, the AJAX, etc., etc. We might mention the need for them on the site, but the point of this course is not to teach you those standards. Okay, and I also won't teach you JavaScript or Java or JDBC programming. Okay, however, you'll see in a minute that Java is actually required for the project, and you're supposed to know. Okay. Projects, and so grading wise, we will use about 45% for projects and homework combined together. I'll tell you a little bit about projects. About 40% for midterm and final, and about 15% for participation. This might change a little, and I'll let you know if it changes. but that's the approximate idea. Okay. And then the participation involves, this was, in general, I want people to actually read papers and follow the lectures. In this particular class, participation is even more important because if you don't read the lectures before coming, if you do not, again, by the way, you don't necessarily have to listen to my lectures. If you understood the material, that's fine. And when you come to the class, you should be able to ask intelligent questions. Okay, that's very important. So class interaction will be evaluated by attendance. That means the class that you're supposed to come to, you must be there. You should be attentive, and there may be occasional quizzes. Okay, and please don't make up for your sleep in my class. That's why. If that is the case, then I'll make you stand on the corner like them. They actually didn't sleep this time, but they certainly won't sleep today. Okay, 471 and 598. We already know that you're going to be meeting on different days. Furthermore, you will also be graded as different subgroups. Okay, I don't know why I keep forgetting to change that. It should be 494 there, obviously. The 494 students would be graded as a group, and 598 students would be graded as a group. And my course is not set up such that 90 and above is A and 80 and above is B, etc. Because that's not what I do. I basically give you the exams I want to give you. You do how well you do, and I look at the overall class performance and make the grade distribution. Okay. So at any time, if you are feeling particularly anxious about where you might be standing, come and talk to me. That's the only way that you can avoid anxiety. Okay. Just because you are not 90, that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be getting in it. Okay. I'm not saying it will happen all the time, but there have been times when, if I have said particularly hard exams, I felt comfortable about giving people with 70 and above NA. Okay, so all I'm saying is these marks. If the world does not have to change such that 90 becomes an A, and I would much rather know what you guys are capable of and what you are getting. Okay. However, I do realize that, especially since now I have a high school going kid, I do realize that many of you are born and bred into 90 and above is A, 80 and above is B. So I'm telling you, I'm repeating myself, that that's not true here. Okay. So if you are worried about your grade at any time, you have to ask me. That's the Okay. Any questions on grading stuff? Okay. So. Project is a big part of this course. There would be, essentially, you'll wind up writing your own little search engine, and it will be individual projects. Everybody writes their own little search engine. And then we will be, obviously, it's not going to be an industrial strength search engine, but the idea is, in doing so, you will learn to implement most of the interesting ideas of information retrieval and mining in that course, in your project. Okay. And then there is a project description. If you're interested, you can, obviously we haven't yet told you what the exact versions are, but this is basically more or less going to be the project, with some minor changes. So you can go ahead and look at that. Okay, those are the 3 parts that people did last time, and you would wind up doing something close to that. Okay, there may be minor changes in links and so on, but that's basically the 3 things. So in the first part, you might do text ranking. The second part, you actually do link analysis, things like page ranking and so on. And the third part is sort of free form. You can decide to add a bunch of bells and whistles to your search engine, depending on your interest. Okay, that's where it is. If you want to do a completely different project, you can come and try to explain to me that it is of equal difficulty, and if I feel that that is interesting enough, I might let you do it. But otherwise, this is the default project for the class. Okay. Okay. The project requires Java programming, and you are expected to know Java. We are not going to teach you the programming here. It's too late. And you should have a reasonable competence. It's not like you need to know every bell and whistle, but you should be comfortable in programming Java. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. Okay. As I said, we won't be teaching you Java. We won't be able to debug your programs, etc. We expect that you know to use Java. Any questions? Okay. This is a course on web. Everything is on web. All the answers to any questions I can potentially ask you are on the web. Okay. Unless you think your brain is the web. When I ask you to do a question, I ask you to do it, not the web. Okay. So I say upfront that when there are homeworks, etc., there may be, we are all in the business where every once in a while I get a question from some student somewhere who says he or she is particularly interested in this particular aspect. Can I just work it out for them? And I would love to believe that the student is just interested in the knowledge for knowledge's sake, but typically they need it done by like tomorrow morning because the homework is due tomorrow morning. And I'm pretty sure there are ways of doing this on the web. You can talk to people, you can get worked out problems and so on. All I can say is the honor code for this course is that you do your work yourself. In some sense, you are essentially certified that you did the work yourself. Okay. If you are copying answers from web and if we can show that you did that, that basically is curtains for you. Okay, seriously. I would assume, I'll make the assumption that all of you are honorable people, but you cannot say, maybe I'll try it and if I get caught, then that will be the first chance and I'll do something. No. The first time you get caught, that's the end of your life, as far as this course is concerned. So please remember that. I won't repeat this again, but that's the honor code. And that allows me to give things that I can expect you to do sometimes at home rather than always under my watchful eyes. Okay? But we are in a world where everything is online. It's great, but it's also ultimately what do you know, not just what Google knows. Okay. This is about, again, the participation. And then, as I said, there is no actual textbook, and you have to follow the readings and lecture videos. Okay, that's also not very much important. Next week, when the formal part of the course will be starting, and as I said, lecture videos that I showed earlier would be the required videos. I'll send you an email to remind you. But as I said, the IR, the first 2 lectures of the IR, which is never comes up, are the ones that you're supposed to have watched before coming to the class. I will be a little more lenient on undergrads for the first week because they will have to keep listening to me on Thursday and find time over the weekend to have seen these by Tuesday for the first week. But next week onwards, we just have to find time. Okay. Again, as I said, the first 2 lectures of information retrieval will be what you would be, you would have reviewed them before coming to the class next week. And the readings actually for that are these chapters from that book on IR that I showed you in the reading page. Okay? Questions? Anything at all about course administration? Because the next thing I'm going to do is, again, the overview of the course at a more drilled down level. And that's what we'll continue on Thursday too. And then we'll start talking about the common grades. Any questions at all? Okay. Okay, so this is, this part of the lecture would make a lot more sense after the course is over. But I have to do it again. I mean, there is a interesting statement by Schopenhauer, the philosopher, that life only makes sense when you look at it backwards, but unfortunately you have to live it forwards. Okay? Overviews of courses make a lot more sense after the course is over. But unfortunately you never actually look back and say, wow, that's what he must have been meaning when he gave the overview. But I will do it anyway, so that hopefully, as and when we get to those parts, you remember. Okay, so basically, if you're going to think of web as a collection of information, because the word information is common in the course, information retrieval, information mining, information integration. Okay, so web, we want to think of it as a collection of information. Now the question is, what types of information? And you can think of web as basically, currently at least, has text, obviously, lots and lots of text in different languages. You have structured data. Do people think, again, I don't know how many of you are at what level, but do people think web has structured data? Many companies basically put their databases on the web. Right? When you buy a ticket from Expedia, it's not reading Shakespeare to figure out whether or not flights are available. It has a big database into which it looks, and it provided you a web interface to it. So web also is full of structured data. In fact, people say that a lot more of the web data is structured than it is, basically the natural language or English. It's just that we mostly focus on the English or whatever language pages. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a huge amounts of data that's basically has been called, and we'll hear about this word again later on. It's called the hidden web. Much of the hidden web is structured data. Every interesting site you can think of, Amazon, Expedia, they all have huge, huge databases. Amazon is a big relational database. And you can ask questions. You're not surprised that you can ask questions to Amazon. Do you have this book? Do you have that book? But it's also interesting that it's not a database that you have control over. My favorite example is if you have a big database of books right under your table. Okay, how many of you have done 412, the database course, or know something about databases? Okay, so if you have done any database stuff, then you know that you can put a database up and you can ask it queries in SQL, for example, in SQL. Now, if you have a big database of books, right, you can of course ask, do I have the following book? You can also ask, for example, and you can also ask that to Amazon. You can ask, what are all the books written by Mark Twain? You can also ask that to Amazon. You can ask your program, your database, tell me all the books that I have 379 pages, because I'm into 379 page books. My database will give it. Try getting it from Amazon. Do they know whether or not they have books for 379 pages? Of course they do. Will they give it to you? No, they won't. Can you make them give it to you? Can you make them give it to you? Hacking is life. Okay, I'm sorry. I understand Pirate Bay is supposed to be bad, but hacking is life. Okay, if somebody says you can't do it, you have to find a way to do it. Unless they'll put you in jail, in which case, walk away. But the point is, if you really want 379 page books from Amazon, how will you get them?
Purchase.
What?
Purchase.
Oh, okay. So you have a lot of money. So clearly this kid has no problem with $50 fine for the hybrid class. So you'll buy a whole bunch of books and check whether or not they are 379 pages. No, that's a good way of answering. Deep pocket way of answering. But he also is suggesting another way of answering this query. Just ask for any book, Mark Twain. You'll get a bunch of books. You can see how many of them have 379 pages. So if there is any, then you keep it in this list of 379 page books. But when they show the Mark Twain book, they'll also show, you may be interested in all these other books. So you ask that book. They'll tell you the number of pages in that book and show you a bunch of other books. And so you keep asking this question until they say you're doing denial of service attack, and they'll put your IP address in a blacklist. But you can answer the question. This looks like hacking, but it's actually an interesting way of answering queries over databases that have access restrictions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so you have a database. I know you have a database. You don't want to give me the answer. So I'll figure out how to get it. And both the good guys and bad guys need to know that this can be done. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if in fact there is a particular crazy thing wherein Amazon happens to have the social security number of the author, and it'll only show it to you if you look at the entire book page, and it thinks since nobody can ask us queries about social security number, we are particularly safe in terms of privacy restrictions. They should think again. Because you are not born yesterday, you're going to find a way of getting a large number of books, checking up all their social security numbers, and then publish it somewhere. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, it's like databases. You would have, if you had database right on your table, you would have answered these queries. If Amazon has it, you can still answer some of the queries by being more creative about it. And we'll learn how, those are interesting issues from a database perspective. And so I can say web is text, structured data, semi-structured data. What is semi-structured data? Semi-structured data essentially are data. So first of all, do people understand what's the difference between structured and structured data and text? Okay, so text is text. Okay, structured data is a record like this. So for example, if you have an employee record, so here's the big table, the name, the social security number, height, salary, hair color, etc. Okay, and then so here is Rao, you didn't really expect to give this number, height 9 feet, salary lots and lots of money, 17 million, hair color dark, and so on. Okay. Now, that's structured. So you can ask, give me people who have $17 million or more in salary, and you will be able to find me. Okay? Give me people who are at least 9 feet tall, you will be able to find me. Whereas if this was written as a nice flowing English document, saying there goes Rao, who is very, very tall, taller than 8 feet, and so on. Okay, you will understand it, but it will be harder to answer the question. Give me somebody who is 9 feet tall. You get my point, okay? So by putting it in structure, I make, as I said, I can make answering queries easier. If I write it in English, I can be much more stylistic, etc., but I need a human brain at this point, or a good natural language processing system to be able to answer the same queries. Okay, so structure makes querying easier. Structure is a record like this, essentially. Okay, in a structured case, for example, you can say, let's say comments could be a field. Okay, and then you can write a lot of text about what you think about this particular employee. Then what happens is this column has values that essentially have no domain. Any English file is a domain value. That makes this column unstructured. Everything else is structured. So then that makes this record semi-structured. Semi-structured means part of it is structured, part of it is not structured. Life is full of semi-structured data. Give me another example of semi-structured data. Do people get emails? Email is semi-structured. There is a from field, there is a to field, there is a CC field, there is a BCC field, there is a host field, whatever. And then there is a body field. The body is just like comments field. And you can search emails either just by searching keyword, search on them, or you can say, get me all the mails from Ra. Get me all the mails that came more than 15 days back. So you're able to answer more queries. Okay, so web can be thought of as made up of either text or structured data, semi-structured data. And one of the other interesting parts about web is many of the pages are connected. And not only are they connected, they have links. They not only like other pages, they actually specify. And Facebook made you people do that. Right? In the old days, only pages will put a link to other page. Now, I don't have a Facebook account, by the way, but I believe, you can now say relationship status, and then my significant other, and then put links to these people. And then be surprised that your privacy is invaded day after tomorrow, but that's a different story. So you all have all these links for both pages and social media, and that's different from traditional media. In the following sense, traditional books did books in library refer to each other?
Yes.
Of course they did. Okay, of course they did. But it was harder to exploit those references because somebody has to read them and make the connections. Whereas on the web, in fact, you actually put a hyperlink directly, and so even a machine, even a dumb program can follow these links. And so you can exploit them much more easily. Okay. Of course, you also have, web is also full of images, audio, video, etc. We would not be spending as much time figuring out what to do with them. It is worth talking about them, but you're not going to do it in this course. Okay, so if you have all this stuff, what do you want to do with it? To some extent, I've already started answering that question. You want to search. You want to be able to say, give me stuff which has the answer to this query. Give me documents which have the answer to this query. Give me records which have the answer to this query. You might want to do directed browsing. I want to hear all about PageRank now. So give me all the pages that talk about PageRank, the most important pages that talk about PageRank. Okay? Aggregation. I might want to know all the books written by Mark Twain, not just one of the books. Okay? Integration. I might want to take the basically my friend is coming from San Francisco to Phoenix, and I need to figure out where their flight is right now so that I can go and pick them up. So there is one source, let's say Southwest, which tells me what this friend's flight number is. There is another source which might be tracking the flights. So I can take this, plug it into this, and then I'll be able to answer the question as where my friend's flight is and whether or not I should go on time or go late. Okay, now clearly that's integration. That is basically pieces of information in two different sources and you combine them. That's the integration part. Now for certain kinds of integration, everybody wants to do that integration so often that you might make a dedicated, like a top source, which just takes the flight number, the Phoenix and the destination and the source destination city, and directly gives you that tracking. Okay, that's what is happening these days. If you ever actually track a flight, essentially, if you even say A2015, Google will already say, would you like to track it? Click here. And those are also called mashups. A mashup is a specific integration system. It integrates just two specific kinds of queries together. Normal integration can be, I can take any information from this source, any information from this source, and sort of join them. For those of you who come from who know anything about databases, one of the biggest neat things about databases is, so suppose raw social security number, and then here is another table that IRS maintains, social security number, taxes paid. And you don't like the course the way it's going, and I already told you I make $17 million, so if you get my social security number and plug it in, and you might find I only paid $20 in taxes, you can report me. Right? You integrated information from here to here. In database parlance, that is called a join, a bow tie. You just joined two tuples to figure out additional information. Okay? Integration is joining databases when the databases are not under your control. Joining databases where the data is not actually structured. It may only be semi-structured. That's a way of thinking about integration. Okay? So you might want to do search, direct browsing, aggregation, integration. You might also want to look for patterns. For example, you have a humongous amount of data, so you might want to be able to just learn from the web. Basic facts of life, for example. Okay, one cute thing actually is, let's see if we can do this. Suppose you came from Mars and you wanted to know whether water flows up or down. water. Oh, Bing, who knows Bing? Probably Bing it goes up. Okay. So apparently I've done it enough that they actually wrote this. Water flows uphill. Okay? Well, of course, there are some people who think water flows uphill. Some people also think Earth is flat. We can't just, go with this. So what do you need to know? You need to figure out how many pages are there. 170,000 pages think water flows uphill. Hey, if you're coming from Mars, that's a pretty good reason to believe that Earth folks think water flows uphill. But then you should also check in another tab. Down here. And apparently 1,080,000 people think water flows down here. So you learned useful information in today's class. That water actually flows down here. And what I would like you to do actually, if possible, by the end of this course, put enough pages such that Google will think that water flows up here. Okay? Get busy with that. We'll start talking about the rest of it on Thursday. Thursday we'll still be here. And next week onwards, we will be doing the IR discussion. See you.